After 4 days of questioning, a jury has been selected in the Tupac Shakur murder trial. Pretty amazing to say. They started with a group of 36 prospective jurors, which was whittled down to the 12 jurors, 4 alternates who are going to decide whether Duane Keffe D. Davis orchestrated Tupac's killing. Now, I'll tell you, finding a jury in a case this well-known, not easy. Lawyers didn't just ask, have you heard of Tupac Shakur? They were asked if they ever heard or listened to his music, if they had followed the case all these years, if they had ever been connected to a gang. They were even questioned about their favorite books and movies, even if they had nothing to do with the case. They were also asked if they would be able to handle what it would be graphic crime scene and autopsy photos. So what do we know about the jurors? Obviously not much. You never know their identities, but the 12 jurors and four alternates include 10 women, 6 men. We know the opening statements are expected on Monday, and then you're going to get to the witnesses. And that reported list includes Suge Knight, Death Row Records boss, who was driving the BMW when Tupac was shot, although there is a question if he'll testify. Former LAPD Detective Greg Kading, who investigated the case, recorded Keffe D's now infamous account. Reggie Wright Jr., former Death Row security chief, we actually had him on the show last night, confirmed that he has been subpoenaed. And during that interview, he also brought up another potential witness, filmmaker Mike Dorsey. Now, Dorsey produced and directed the documentary Murder Rap, Inside the Biggie and Tupac murders, built around Kading's investigation and Keffe D's recorded account. And years before Keffe D was arrested, it was Dorsey who helped push the case back into the spotlight, campaigning for the Las Vegas police to act after Keffe D publicly talked about being in the car with Tupac's killer. So did that public pressure help turn a decades-old cold case into the trial we're watching now? Let me ask the man himself, Mike Dorsey. Thank you so much for taking the time, sir. Do you think that if it wasn't for you pushing, we wouldn't be here right now? And by the way, are you amazed that we're here right now?
I am. It's a surreal moment. I mean, almost 3 years ago, Keffe D was arrested, and I sat there in my home and watched the press conference with the police, announcing the arrest, and that was surreal. And now that the jury is actually seated and we're going to trial next week, I'm experiencing that all over again. As for whether or not they would have made the arrest or not, it's hard to know if they would have, discovered Keffe D's public confessions eventually. I think because I called attention to it in early 2018, when the BET series Death Row Chronicles aired his first ever public interview, that started them on the trail sooner. And I also think it helped that we had finally there at Las Vegas Police a detective who was fully committed to closing out this case before he retired. So it was a mixture of factors.
By the way, just for everybody who's following and doesn't know the details of it, you made Murder Rap about the investigation, right? Do you know how much of this case the jury is about to hear is completely brand new, new evidence, new theories, or how much has it been around for all these decades and it's just now being presented in front of a jury?
I think it's the latter. I think a lot of it's been around for a long time. I think police knew within weeks who did it. I think the Keffe D, Duane Davis, the defendant, his nephew, Orlando Anderson, was always the prime suspect from day one. And they knew that this was what happened. I think they just needed that extra bit of evidence in order to make a case. And that evidence, coincidentally, was provided by Keffe D himself when he started doing public interviews now, 8 years ago. So that's what they needed. They needed Keffe to do these interviews.
I'll talk about what his defense is there. But do you know if you're going to be called as a witness and what you'd be asked?
Yes, I can reveal here for the first time. Actually, I have been subpoenaed and I will testify. So I'm prepared to go. And I provided them with some evidence that I'm not going to go into publicly, but
I understand.
But that they need me there to help introduce. So I will be testifying. Absolutely.
Okay, we'll wait and see that. Look, Keffe D has said now that what he allegedly said in so many different times was all made up, right? That he exaggerated it to sell, books, that he was trying to make money. Which version of Keffe D's story rings true to you?
I think the version that he's been giving for the last few years, he's more believable, in my opinion, when he was giving these public interviews when he didn't think there were going to be any repercussions. Now that he's facing life in prison, I find him far less believable, because now he is facing repercussions for what he said. And I also find his explanations now completely ridiculous. He's claiming that he didn't write his book. Fine, we knew he had a co-writer on it, but he's saying he didn't even know what was in the book. He's claiming he didn't even know the book was going to be published. I just find that completely ridiculous. He's been promoting the book since before it even came out. So he literally held the book up on YouTube and said, "This is my book. This is the real truth. You should read it." So
let me ask you this.
It's a bit ridiculous.
Let me ask you this. If the jury is kind of conflicted about whether or not he wrote the book or whether or not he's being truthful, what's the other strong evidence against him? Is there enough, right? I mean, you're talking about a very old case. I don't know, I believe there's no murder weapon. I think they don't have the car in terms of direct eyewitnesses. What do they have?
They have, luckily, there was a lot of really good police work done back in the 90s, back when this case was fresh. They have statements recorded, some of them written down, from informants, gang informants in Keffe's own gang, who have provided information that corroborate what he's saying now, or what he was saying in his public interviews. His nephew Orlando Anderson was reportedly going all over Compton bragging about committing this murder. The whole neighborhood knew it. So when Keffe went public, it was kind of just finally reconfirming all this other evidence that they already had. And, as far as, placing himself in Las Vegas, for example, now he's trying to say he wasn't even in Las Vegas, even though he places himself there. One of his closest friends back then gave a statement back in, I think, 2006 to police, where he listed the people there, and he listed Duane Davis, Keffe D, as being one of the people there. So I get that. I think in this day and age, you'll hear a lot of prosecutors complain about kind of the CSI effect of, there's not going to always be this silver bullet piece of evidence, a DNA or whatever. But I think when the jury hears all of his statements that he has to say, I think they're going to make the conclusion that what he was saying back then was very, credible.
It was problematic for him to do an interview so close to the trial. Before I let you go,
amazing.
Suge Knight reportedly was there, right? He seems to have no interest in testifying. But what do you think? You think he'll end up testifying?
I don't think he will. Suge Knight, people should remember, is also a victim. He was struck by shrapnel or something during the shooting. He was hit in the head. So he's one of the victims in this, not just a witness. But also Suge Knight is doing a long prison sentence. And he has stated very clearly he does not want to be seen as sending someone to prison, at being a prison himself. And if you talk to anyone who used to be incarcerated, they all tell you prison, they wouldn't wish that on their worst enemy. And I think that's the situation he's in now. He doesn't want to be seen as snitching. And he definitely doesn't want to be seen as that when he's got at least, I think another decade left to serve. But I do think when you read between the lines, if he could exonerate Keffe D, that would be the opposite of informing on him. That would be setting a man free. And the fact that he's not willing to do that, to me, says a lot. But Suge has also made so many conflicting statements over the years. He's even gone so far as to say Tupac's still alive, that he's problematic.
Someone
for
told me
either
that
a defense
today.
or a prosecutor.
Someone actually said, I believe that. So look, by the way, it's just, it's remarkable that we're here. And I've said this before, I think it's remarkable the lasting legacy of Tupac Shakur and how much people are invested and care and are looking at this. I think that says a lot about who that man was. Mike Dorsey, thank you so much for coming on. We will see you on the stand maybe, all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.